In the midst of the controversy surrounding GSC, I figured we could go back and understand the roots of this company. It's well known that the company started out as Sergiy's garage, as well as pirating games on his CDs to make a living for the first few months before moving on to actual projects. This explains their unusual leniency towards mod makers and overall unauthorized asset use. Now, if we look into Sergiy a little bit more, we understand that he actually founded GSC at 16, which is amazing. And the letters of GSC actually come from his name, Romanized. Now, if you take a look at the collaborators here, you might recognize a few of these names. Oleg Yavorsky, Dmitry Kuzmenko, Eugene, his brother, who, if you've kept up with Stalker 2, you would know that Eugene actually heads this, Vladimir Litvinenko. It is honestly a little bit hard to find information about these people, and there are quite a few notable names left off of this page. For example, Prof, or Andrew Prokhorov, co-creator. Among the many people in early GSC, Prof went on to Metro. This is, of course, around the time Sergiy had a Ferrari, wasn't paying any of the employees. I think there was something about a strike even. Nonetheless, a good bit of the employees left, never to return, went on to found 4A Games. If we take a look at some Reddit threads for the pirating allegations, the fun thing is GSC started with pirate best 1,000 games discs, so this is actually kind of anecdotal. If we go according to the Wikipedia, the company employed 15 people in a 2-room apartment. Early employees included his younger brother Evgeny, and of course, Prof. The company was the first in Ukraine to translate video games into Russian, additionally creating multimedia CD-ROMs. This article comes from a Ukrainian website. The first interview with Sergiy Grygorovych. We were introduced to Sergiy by a person who knew everyone, Alex Petitsia. The first office of GSC was located in an ordinary apartment in Abalon, in the same house where bearded uncle lived. It was September 98, and the first issue of Home PC was still a few months away. Sergiy Svitlichny and I wrote for Computer Review, and in parallel worked on the concept and materials of DPK number 1 out of 1998. So we of course could not miss the opportunity to meet Ukrainian developers. Even if my life depended on it today, I would not find that house, except for its approximate location. Let the residents of Abalon forgive me, but in 1998 the entire central part of the neighborhood consisted of exactly the same Soviet 9-story panel buildings, with individual 16-story buildings between them. That is, it was an absolutely standard Ukrainian panel building in the late 90s. The smelly garbage chute, a dirty elevator with burnt buttons, never understood that. Why? Broken glass here and there, burnt light bulbs, etc. GSC occupied a 3-room apartment, so now it goes from 2 to 3, and I don't remember which floor. Almost all Ukrainian game studios, and as it turned out, not only Ukrainian ones, see David Kushner's book Master of Doom, how 2 guys created an empire and transformed pop culture, went through 3 stages of development: apartment, factory, when studio offices were located in premises former Soviet factories, and the stage of business centers. Not all survived the last. The serious guy who looked like a movie star opened the door for us, a neat, almost model-like hairstyle, a knitted sweater, a calm voice, very polite manners. It was Anton Bolshakov, a friend and confidant of Sergiy Grygorovych, and actually GSC Game World was based on the synergy of these two. The head of the company himself was sitting with other employees in the former living room, along all the walls of which there were various tables with computer equipment. Sergiy, who was 20 years old at that time, looked like a high school student, a very short haircut, almost a bristle of several centimeters, thin, sinewy physique, a sharp, clearly appraising look, a firm handshake. This guy seemed to know what he wanted. During the interview, answering questions about education and how they got into hacking and game development, Sergiy was clearly bored. He hated Soviet schools and universities and believed they could teach nothing worthwhile. And that if a person wants to develop, they should engage in business and self-education. However, what reason would he have to say that?
Это прекрасно. Значит, мы можем начинать наш урок.
Popular accounts would suggest that Soviet schooling was standardized. Everyone learned the same thing, and usually the same way. It was in this fashion that the accent was slowly ground out, as they only taught one form of Russian. Now, I tried to dig up info on Sergiy's family just to see if maybe one of them had been a pioneer in the Komsomol, had a party card, something, but information was sparse. Switching languages and digging through Ukrainian articles helped a little. One article says that he actually started his business as a 12-year-old, but as we go on, you'll find out it was even sooner than that. But according to this article, the price was at first 50 kopecks, but when demand grew, he doubled it, making it the cost of lunch with every rental. I was depriving my classmates of lunch, but they were happy, he said, adding that his business collapsed once his pocket games were broken by some irresponsible leasers. This Kyiv Post article actually acknowledges GSC's pirating, or at least Sergiy's, for the very first time in print. Grygorovych distributed his encyclopedias through a pirate chain, copying and selling about 20 to 30 of them per month, and earning from 500 to 3,000 for each one. This next bit comes from Ukrainian Gazeta. The first money Grygorovych earned was in grade 5. The school had a student exchange program with France. Frenchman Julian came to our family, gave a children's football game. I brought it to school. At first, just to let you play, and when the queue lined up, he began to take 25 kopecks, then a ruble. He went back to France and bought another game. His mother, Lyubov Viktorovna, worked as a journalist in Ukrinform. His father, Konstantin Petrovich, is the adjuster of equipment at the Etalon plant. His mother wanted him to play the piano. They actually got one in installments for 800 rubles. We'll go over this later. The more important part of this article is about his family. It would appear that this was actually a personal article because it talks about the apartment, the furnishing, and, well, daily interactions. On the table near the plasma TV, there was a yellow statue, Pride of the Country. It was handed to Sergiy this year. What year that was is uncertain. I don't know what they've been given. He throws his feet on a white leather sofa. They rewarded people who risked their lives for others. I just became a millionaire at the age of 18. Bill Gates was already a billionaire at 26. But I don't want to die at work. I'm going to run a championship with a Ferrari. And apparently during this time, he wasn't very careful, breaking his ribs, knees, crushing his shoulder blades, breaking the left collarbone 5 times, as well as injuring the nerve endings of the spine and breaking his arm. He eventually switched to table tennis. From the rest of the article, it talks about their family, how he's bought cars for his wife, how they have 2 children already and plan to have 4 more, although I'm not sure how dated this is. And finally, after going back to the Stalker forum, I find out more about his childhood. He lived with his grandmother Donetsk for the first 3 years.
Это Donetsk.
In elementary school, he drew money and bought chewing gum with it. When a lot of hand-drawn money spread, the class suffered inflation. In the 2nd grade, Sergiy and his classmates glued envelopes to the extended day group. For each envelope, students were charged around 1/10 of a penny. As a child, he loved all outdoor sports, especially table tennis. He had 2 dreams about his future vocation, a clown and an astronaut. He decided to become an astronaut right away, but a clown. When my mother and I were at the circus, we showed different animals tricks. Everyone clapped, but when a clown suddenly appeared on a tightrope and ascended onto the stage, the audience was completely delighted. Then the 2nd dream immediately formed. So truly, if we go by this, he was already worried about money and, well, buying things and whatnot. And then it talks about 5th grade again, with a student exchange program. However, it gives us more context. The French language teacher gave Sergiy an ultimatum. If he manages to pass the exam in the subject by at least 4 points, then he will be taken to France. So he took courses and in 3 months learned the language at a fairly high level. Right up until graduation from school, Sergiy had only A's in French. In France, he saw that unlike our black and white Kyiv of the 80s, there was a beautiful life with the McDonald's, Champs-Élysées, Pugot. I decided to become rich, but it was in Ukraine. Back in school, he says, when I was 13 to 14, I was writing my first computer science lab programs. I had a desire to create my own games. I even tried programming simple scrollers. I wrote the code myself, worked with graphics. At that time, I already wanted to make games, but it was completely unclear how to make them. It goes into detail more about the piano, weaving macrame baskets for flower pots, planners, murals, and pendants. In 1990, in order to get money from the savings account, Sergiy's father decided to purchase a POIS computer with a disk drive and a memory expander worth 6,000 to 7,000 rubles, about the equivalent of a Lada. Although his mother was against it and did not see the point in such a purchase, This is how the family developed a passion for computer games. At some point, their number reached 150, which prompted Sergiy to exchange games with his friends. Sergiy eventually went to the market to buy a floppy disk that would contain 50 games, but in the end, he managed to find only a couple of places where such floppy disks were sold, and their costs reached 70 rubles, and the games on them were only old. Sergiy, on the other hand, had games at his disposal that were not available on the market. He realized that he had something no one else had, which means he could make money from it. This created a unique commercial offer. So he borrowed 200 rubles from his friend, Anton Bolshakov, one of the co-founders, if you, well, remember correctly, which his mother gave him for his birthday. Added some of his savings and bought a pack of floppy disks. The cost of double-sided floppy disks at that time reached 500 rubles, while Sergiy managed to purchase defective single-sided ones literally for pennies. After that, he formatted them so that they did not differ in volume from two-sided ones, recorded games on them, and began selling them on the radio market. In one day, he managed to earn about 350 rubles, equivalent to his father's monthly salary. After paying back the debt, he began to expand production, increasing the base of games, the total number, the range. He purchased 2 disk drives, which allowed him to speed up the process of recording games, and a printer to print bright, colorful covers. Other sellers wrote the names of the games on pens or printed them with a dot matrix printer. Sergiy also had a color printer on which he printed pictures from games, so that the buyer could look and imagine what kind of toy he was talking about. This had become one of the competitive advantages. Sergiy was engaged in trading on weekends, and devoted his free time on weekdays to recording games and their technical support. Over time, his work gained momentum and floppy disks were bought at an inflated price. It got to the point that a kind of racket happened. Local criminals demanded a certain amount from him for entering the market, for one seller, and for his own trading place. As he says, local bizarre bandits tried to cheat. I had to pay. There was nothing I could do. They were tough guys. A clear amount was stipulated that had to be paid for admission to the radio market for one seller and the actual trading place. But it didn't look like extortion, but taxes. Sometimes new Russians in crimson jackets would come, buy a few games, ask them to show them, their children and friends how to install the game and generally how to play it. I didn't take any money for this. Considering the order amount of 1,000 or 1,500 rubles, I considered it my duty to provide technical support. In 8th grade, when he was 15, at one of the computer science lessons, the students were given the task of writing a program. He started creating the game and realized that it was difficult to master it. The essence of the game would be as follows. A tank rides at the bottom of the screen and shoots the targets that appear. Sergiy drew everything on graph paper, transferred it to a computer program, but the game worked very slowly. That's because he only knew half of what you needed to know about programming. That's why he got distracted from the game and started making a program that will draw graphics. At the same age, he painted the first logo of his future company, GSC. As his account goes, I wrote a program that drew graphs, i.e. you enter any function and it plots it for you, and I called it Chicago 95, an analog of Windows 95, because he idolizes Bill Gates. The father saw it and said, quickly, why did you call it that? Aren't you a patriot? And then I had it named it Oblivion 95. In general, my father presented the idea that what you do should be named after you, only in this case, you will be 100% engaged in your business. At the same age, he got a job at a small desk dealing with computer technology. The director of the company, Alexander Tyurin, became a kind of role model for Sergiy at that time. His phrase, working honestly is not only peace of mind, but also profitable, gave Sergiy a clear understanding that a businessman should conduct business honestly. After moving to 10th grade, his parents increasingly advised him to quit the business and start preparing for university. The competition for the National Technical University of Ukraine, Kyiv Polytechnic Institute, where the parents wanted their son to enter, was quite high. The question arose about the need for additional classes. Grygorovych listened and studied with tutors for a year and a half, and devoted the last 6 months before enrolling solely to studying. From 1994 to 96, the competition in the sale of computer games in the market increased significantly. According to Sergiy, there were a lot of sellers, about 150. At that time, he left the business to go to college, but he really missed his previous job. He began to think it was necessary to develop something of his own and sell abroad, and he should start this path in his own market. One day he came across one of the Duke Nukem series of games. He noticed that in the English language, the voiceover files were in a separate directory. Overnight, he made the localization himself using a microphone he bought for $3, and found it necessary to find a publisher. So he went to Moscow to look for and showed a publication to one and was refused. In the second, 21st Century accepted the offer and purchased it for $1,200. Sergiy already wanted to create a company and organize work, but his temporary certificate held him back. Eventually, business took up almost all of his free time and there was no time to study, so he got expelled for skipping classes. He began looking for customers in Russia. He wrote out addresses in Moscow of companies that advertised the sale of CDs and specialized press. The multimedia entertainment software market was just emerging in Russia, but it didn't exist in Ukraine yet. There were already companies like Buka and Nikita that made simple educational games for children. I visited several companies in Moscow. As expected, I wasn't welcome everywhere. They said the standard phrase, "We are not interested in this," but I confidently continued my search and found my customer. Everything I offered him was approved by him, which means it was funded. We started to produce a whole line of products, educational games, encyclopedias. Our company staff increased to 15. They were all of different ages, and the oldest was over 50. In order to avoid misunderstandings, it was necessary to act harshly. If the work was poorly done, he paid less than promised. He broke off relations with those who refused to understand requirements. There were a lot of unemployed people then, so the phone was constantly ringing. As a result, I was like the head of a recruitment agency, interviewing a huge number of candidates. Then I learned not only how to recruit, but also how to ensure that employees believe in what they are doing. In order for an employee to do something, he must be emotionally interested in his business. He must have an idea, inspiration. In our case, there were many inspirations. We were developing a new direction in education, with a computer-based learning model was the future. The light at the end of the tunnel was the idea of creating an entire research institute that would develop this idea. In addition, I always pay each employee a little more than their work is actually worth. A little more is just enough for moral satisfaction, but not much more, otherwise it will interfere with the work. If wages are distributed unfairly, there may be a lot of problems in the team. Everyone should understand the rules of the game, why one gets 100 and the other gets 2. Therefore, my task is to keep employees' salaries at the lowest possible level. After all, when developing multimedia software, the main cost, almost 90%, is labor. Piecemeal payment motivates you best. You've done your job and received a reward. This is beneficial because you can get better quality work for less money. If we are talking about research work or inventions, the employee receives the minimum wage, and if something sensible turns out, he gets a good reward. They eventually set a record of localizing 26 games in a month. This work experience made it possible to learn project management in small classes, which lasted from 1 day to 6 months. It was a good school, which allowed us to start creating a giant. From 1997 to 99, he realized there was no demand for the company's products in the foreign market, so in 97 on his initiative, GSC began developing its own Western-level adventure quest game. The game is called Doom Quest. It seemed to the developers that it would be easy to make the project, but they had no experience in creating such important elements for the genre as the plot, memorable characters, and unusual graphics. Work on the project lasted 9 months and ended in cancellation. The team could not come up with a good plot, so they moved on to Warcraft. Since it was one of the more popular RTS games at that time, almost all of the developers of the company played it in the evenings and in principle knew RTS as well. Sergiy suggested to his colleagues to redesign the software part. They hacked the game, left the graphic content the same, and the game engine was thoroughly rewritten. Which created many new features and significantly improved the old ones. The project was named Warcraft 2000 Nuclear Epidemic. We plan to sell this game to the Warcraft developer company in the USA, more precisely to offer them to make Warcraft 3. This made sense because the code written by the Americans was very complex, therefore cumbersome and clueless, and we wrote a good one. It was possible to meet and get acquainted with the developers of Warcraft at a specialized exhibition in the USA. In 1998, the Russians defaulted, leading to economic problems in Ukraine, which affected GSC, almost leading it to ruin. Subsequently, the employees' salaries were lowered, and reorientation to the European market became not only desirable, but necessary. In the crisis of 1998, I gathered everyone, he said. And he said, "Sorry, it just happened. I'm reducing salaries by half." At that time, we had huge sales, and then a bang, and a complete zero. We realized we need to enter the European market, another such crisis in the CIS, and we will have to run away. In 1998, Sergiy was just planning to take his younger brother Yevgen from school and give him something to do in GSC. Well, in general, Sergiy was not very interested in telling something he wanted to show. So as soon as there was a pause in the conversation, he said, "Let me show you something," and led us to a computer in the corner. The person sitting at the PC gave way. It was the incredibly modest Andrei Shpan, the programmer who created the DMCR engine on which Cossacks and all other GSC strategies worked. Sergiy sat down on the computer and started a file. The entire screen was filled with brown. Sergiy called up the control panel, typed some combination, and a green orc from Warcraft appeared under the cursor. Then another, and more. Sergiy moved the mouse and hundreds of Warcraft sprite characters appeared on a brown background. We have never seen so many units on one screen in our life. The animations of some of the orcs were synchronized, and it seemed that even this crowd on the screen was breathing like one big creature. "There may be thousands of them," said Sergiy, "and this will change everything."
And the downfall of Grim Batal, the orcs have completely withdrawn their armies from Cosmo.
No game company in the world has anything like this. "What do you want to do with this technology?" we asked. "Blizzard's Warcraft 3, he answered without even thinking. "And I want $1 million.
To protect the borders of Quel'Thalas. Troubles have arisen in the township of Tyr's Hand."
Fortunately, Sergiy did not create Warcraft 3. At that time, Blizzard had already started its own development. Besides, they were afraid to cooperate with some strange teenager. But Sergiy did earn his $1 million using this very technology. Glazing over this article, Sergiy talks about Age of Empires, talks more and more about Warcraft, computer games in general. There's actually a lot of cancelled games. Let's take a look here. Well, I don't know if Venom Codename Outbreak released. I'm going to assume it did. However, there's also some sort of game similar to the 11th Hour, which GSC never made, as well as a game based on the morphing of one scene into another, like Sanitarium. But this game didn't happen either. And then there was another based on the plot of Treasure Island, which was a purely animated hand-drawn quest in the best Sierra tradition. There was already a script and people were working. Now, I'm not sure what they mean by quest here, because that word keeps coming up. They say it's like writing a book. Of course, Treasure Island from GSC never came out, but it was made in 2005 by another Kyiv studio. Interestingly, with all the failed and cancelled projects, Sergiy's not concerned about failure. So many projects and developments. Are you not afraid of failure? No. We firmly decided to get a foothold in this business because software is what we can and want to create. If we fail with game projects, we move on to the implementation of custom and special software. I think we will be able to cope with this too. Of course, for all the good that Sergiy has done, he's also done a lot of bad things too. People call him greedy and shameless. And of course, having 3 cars and, not really paying your employees. I believe there was something about a strike or that they showed up to work for months. I mean, we've already heard about it, right? In an interview with internet magazine My Business, we learned more about his childhood. Not many companies from the former USSR and the current CIS managed to successfully go out of the borders of these unions with your business. And very little of those not only knocked up on the Western market, but also conquered it. My Business talked with the man who founded the best company in Eastern Europe production of computer games and created the most popular strategy of the beginning 21st century, Cossacks. This is Sergiy Grygorovych. My business career started quite early. In the 4th grade, I was exchanged in France, lived in a French family who gave me to the end of my stay. I have a portable computer game, the Western analog of our Will Wait. Only the wolf got the eggs and there was a game about football. I started the money earning, renting the game for 50 kopecks. When the notebook with the cue for the game was painted for 2 weeks ahead, I began to take 1 ruble. Thus, the money given by the parents to their children for lunches stayed with me. Then I bought a second game, and my earnings doubled. So I began to receive 60 rubles a month, being 11 years old. Since then, I have become completely financially independent. After that, I still did a lot of things. Approximately the 6th to the 10th, I traded in the bazaar every weekend instead of resting. It was quite interesting, in a peculiar way, although somewhat shameful. Earning at the bazaar is considered something abnormal, unworthy. At first, I had to overcome some kind of shame barrier, and then you get in and just work. I traded computer games as well as various electronic devices. I remember once sold 2 AONs for $4 each. That was a lot of money then. At the expense of the first AON sold, I bought a computer mouse. They just showed up. They were terrible copies of domestic production, a la Electron Rush, and I had the first real Western mouse, terribly expensive for those times. After school, I entered the Kiev Polytechnic Institute's specialty radio electronics. A year later, I got expelled. Then I entered the specialty economics in the International Scientific and Technical Institute, and left there after the first semester. Due to the fact that I had not studied since childhood, but worked, at the time of creation I already had some startup capital. No worries, never borrowed, did not take any loans, no parents or relatives. My parents borrowed, I didn't. The problems were of a different property. I remember for a long time I could not register the company due to the fact that at 16, for years instead of a passport, I received a temporary certificate due to a lack of passport forms in the country. According to the certificate, no tax didn't agree to register my company. As a result, registration lasted almost a year until I got a normal passport. I even came to the tax office, shouted at them, "You infringe my rights, I want to start a company and work." Now you can only imagine it, a boy runs like that screaming at the adult uncle. We started with small, low-budget projects, educational children's encyclopedias and translations of games into Russian, but I wanted to make games myself. So when we made 10,000, we spent it on our first own project and closed it. Then there was a second attempt and failed again. But in the end, we reached the level we were able to create a fully fledged, high-quality game. I must say that Grygorovych is not like public events and especially communication with journalists, the journal says. He believes that he cannot speak as well as a specialist from GSC's press service. However, if a meeting with the press cannot be avoided, Grygorovych speaks with some pride about the beginning of his career, while emphasizing that he achieved everything on his own. However, why be modest? Grygorovych is a typical self-made man. When you learn the details of the formation of his company, you begin to understand that the name is not narcissism, but rather an extra responsibility. What problems did you have to face when starting a business? The main problem that prevented me from doing business was my age. Few people took a 16-year-old boy seriously. There are no more global problems. The company's strategy was aimed at intensive growth, technology expansion and development, by recruiting a large number of employees who were not even needed in such numbers, 3 to 4 people per position, and further training of these people. In this way, we trained qualified personnel for the future. What was the turning point in the development of GSC? We were hinting, of course, at the release of the game Cossacks, which conquered the entire gaming world. There were no turning points. The Cossacks brought us fame, but even before this project there was work, there was business. The income was in the range of a reasonable 25 to 30% per year. There was no sudden breakthroughs and unexpected gifts of fate. The funds, as noted earlier, were their own, received from profits from previous projects. Besides, we didn't start by making Cossacks right away. This is our first completed project. And before that, we worked on a couple others that had to be closed. It was another strategy we hadn't brought to mind, as well as a project in the quest genre. We just didn't feel the strength to create a script for high-quality quest with our own efforts. But pirates bought it from us and sold it as a pirate. We returned about 30% of the amount spent. Nevertheless, it is obvious that GSC before and after Cossacks are two different companies. When we had something to show, I was going to go to the E3, but the American embassy refused me a visa. The following year, I decided to go to E3 again, but got rejected again. In fact, this circumstance slowed down the development of the company for 2 years, because the exhibition is the main thing. You come, show your invention, and if it's interesting, it's already purchasable. It wasn't until the 3rd year that I went to an exhibition in France, and there we presented our project. After a trip to our first exhibition, we realized our game had made an impression. There were many people willing to purchase. The customer was selected from among interested publishers. Everyone said it was a success, that the project was revolutionary, that it had the best graphics, music, engine, etc. But the magnitude of this interest could only be determined by the terms offered. There should be specifics in the conversation. For about a year and a half, we have been fighting to get the most profitable contract. Eventually, the game was published by the German CDV. How much did you earn from the Cossacks? If we count at box office as it is done in cinema, the industry closest to us in terms of structure and content, then the Cossacks series brought in about 100 million in dirty income. And it still does. The figure voiced by Sergiy seems fantastic. Meanwhile, Cossacks became a bestseller not only in the CIS, both parts of the game triumphantly conquered Europe and Asia. A well-chosen name turned out to be the key to success. Even to those people who had a vague idea of the history of the Russian Empire, the word Cossacks was familiar, and therefore recognizable and interesting. According to My Business, the series Cossacks was especially popular in France, where apparently they still remember Cossacks on the streets of Paris after the defeat of Napoleon. The most interesting moment at the launch of Cossacks was our first exhibition, Amelia Games 99 in Cannes, in the same place where the Palme d'Or Film Award is being presented. While known companies and developers have arrived there, the whole color of the gaming and IT industry. At that time, I was in a state of ecstasy from everything that was happening. Gradually, all such moments became a standard labor process. What does it feel like to be a leader in the CIS gaming industry before reaching the age of 30? I would say this: life was a success. All the components of happiness are in place. Financial success is fine with that. Fame, too. Self-realization and success are available. The employment, the demand for what I do, and it is there. In general, history knows a lot of examples when people achieve much more. Therefore, there is a lot to strive for. We are not gentlemen of fortune. The company develops systematically, intensively increasing production and setting higher goals, from simple projects to encyclopedias and training programs, which took from 2 days to a month of work and a budget of $1,000 to $3,000. We gradually grew to projects of the highest class. In 1998, after the economic crisis in Russia, GSC reoriented into the Western market, developing RTS games. GSC unsuccessfully tried to get a contract for the development of Warcraft 3 from Blizzard. According to the CEO, they were rejected due to Blizzard's distrust of Grigorovich's youth. By the end of 1998, the company finished its debut commercial game, Warcraft 2000 Nuclear Epidemic. It was powered by its own engine, which was subsequently reused by Cossacks' European Wars. Nuclear Epidemic distinguished itself from other strategy games at the time with its increased unit size limits. At the beginning of 1999, it was released for free online. They began development on another project titled Doomcraft, which was shuttered 6 months later in favor of the development of Cossacks. In 2001, GSC released the real-time strategy game for Windows, Cossacks European Wars. It was the first game that brought the company financial success and global recognition. Later that year, GSC released a tactical FPS Codename Outbreak, and an expansion for Cossacks named Cossacks: The Art of War. In the same year, GSC began developing a story-driven shooter based on the Stargate series concept and Aztec architecture. It was powered by a custom X-ray engine, which rendered high-quality images and supported many modern technologies. The project was titled Oblivion Lost. Before it became the design, setting, and genre we love, Stalker was known under a different working title, Oblivion Lost. This was back in the early 2000s, which you can find out for yourself if you care to dig through build numbers you can discover online. It's truly astonishing to see the evolution from the rough early rendition to the trilogy we have today. The title went from Oblivion Lost for some time, to Stalker Oblivion Lost, to Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl in or around build 1935, which is one of the famous builds you hear about. There's a reason for that. Everyone knows what came after, but what came before? In the design documents, because none of this was ever fleshed out, there was a plot about alien planets, a sci-fi genre and vehicles, and so on. It sounds a lot like Halo, and like it would have never made much waves in video gaming. Of course, I could just be wrong, but this isn't as attention-grabbing and more cookie-cutter to me. Work on Oblivion Lost began in 2001. Little was known about this storyline. What is known is that it was set in the future, featured an odd technological mix, autonomous bipedal robots appearing side-by-side with single-rotor helicopters and real-life weapons in various environments, from high-tech facilities to ancient Aztec temples. The player, based on build 1098, would control either a space marine of sorts named Jeffrey, or a female soldier of the GOS, apparently named Barbie. The two weapons we know about are the FN-2000 and the M134 minigun. The gameplay would feature vehicles including the Apachetka, a futuristic speedboat, and buggy. All of these would be armed and available to the player. I found a webpage that reads, Build 749 of Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl was compiled on April 19th, 2001, back when it was a sci-fi game called Oblivion Lost. This is an extremely bare-bones prototype that only has you, a gun, and a static level for you to explore. There is no inventory, no enemies, and no menu. The renderer is broken by default. If you boot up the prototype, you'll see that there is no loading screen, and when you get into the game, everything is black and the crosshair is there. If you fire the railgun, the texture used for hitting the wall is the skybox's texture. Thankfully, there are some fixes out there. The HUD consists of just a health and ammo readout. It uses the Comic Sans font and is a green color. Perhaps they were trying to get the reward for World's Ugliest HUD. Crosshair. The crosshair looks similar to and behaves exactly like the one seen in the Serious Sam games. Hitting 2 in-game allows you to play in third-person view. Your character appears to be some sort of mushroom thing with fleshy-looking textures and a gun on top of it. Health and death. By default, you can take damage from high falls. If you die, you will be unable to move around, but you can still look around and fire your gun. Build 749 contains only one playable level, L1_day. This level takes place in an Aztec temple in the surrounding countryside. Past the temple is a lake and a tiny river. There are some mountains past the river and lake that you can't access. You start off in the temple in some sort of room with torches. Behind you are some stairs that lead to the perimeter of the temple. There is a hole you can hop into that will kill you. One side of the room has staircases that lead outside. After going up the stairs, you'll end up on the top of a medium-sized temple with 2 towers on it. There is a broken bridge on one side. On the center of the top is a hole that leads to a room with 2 toppled pillars. A path to the top of some damaged hallways, or a small hall that leads to a room that has stairs that lead back to the top. The lower outer part of the temple consists of 4 areas. One is 2 hallways with some of the wall damaged on one of the halls. Another is a pool in a semi-indoors area. The opposite side of the first pool has a deeper pool that you can't get out of when you get in it. While the last part is stairs that lead directly down to the lower outer temple. There are stairs that let you go to the top of the temple. The ground has several interesting locations. One side has a small river with a giant mountain on the other side. You can walk down a hill and walk over the water Jesus style to get to the mountains on the other side. However, there's a small level seam between the river and the mountains, so you'll probably plunge into the void. Another side has a small but deep ravine with water at the bottom and some rocks jutting from the bottom with trees on them. Jumping in to take a swim will kill you. The opposite side of the ravine of death has a cool looking view of a lake and a large mountain skybox. The texture for the level skybox in the skybox mountains is called L1_ruins, which might be an earlier name for this level. Level list. System.ltx contains a list of levels. The only level that sounds like it was meant to be a real level is L1_day, which is the level you play in the prototype. The rest appear to be either junk or test levels. Build 749 has only one weapon, the railgun from Quake 3 Arena. It's obviously a placeholder for real weapons, but has some differences compared to the one in Quake 3. First, the Build 749 version lacks the glowing parts on the body that the Q3 version does. Second, the gun has a different beam compared to the one in Q3. Textures and some definitions for the Quake 3 machine gun and rocket launcher can be found in the game's files, but there doesn't seem to be any way to actually use them. There are also textures for weapons made by GSC in the texture folder, but again, there doesn't seem to be any in-game guns that use them. Graphics. The real meat of this prototype is the huge amount of unused graphics hidden in the game's files. Several textures for a woman character can be found. She would be a blonde wearing a strange futuristic outfit with the usual cleavage. Interestingly, there are 2 face textures for her. One is complete and dated October 26, 2000, while the other, merely eyes and lips on a skin-colored square, is dated November 9th, 2000. It seems they are working on a new face for the model at one point. Very early graphics for health items show that it was supposed to involve some sort of yellow liquid. Medieval textures. Some of the unused textures seem to be for some sort of medieval area. One of the graphics is notably different in style from the rest of them, while another appears to be a tiny photo of medieval artwork from Britain. The rest are a light gray brick wall with different objects on each texture, such as one having a wheel in front of the wall while another will have some wooden bars. While there are no enemies encountered in the prototype, C++ code governing their intelligence can be found in the game's files. Based on the available code, there would be two types of enemies, alien and jumper. The intelligence code was written by Oleg Shishkovtsov, one of the programmers working on Stalker that left GSC Games and founded 4A Games. I'll leave the link for this website in the description for those interested to read the rest. Assume you don't want to hear about every file, be it an image or .eds, and speculation on them from this website. It's really cool to see the developers apparently become martyrs for Quake though. This page was last edited on 29th of December 2023 at 2011. Isn't that neat? Information is still being dug up about this game, this unfinished product, 20 years later. Talking about dedication, I chatted with Tejas Stalker as we have about Tarkovsky films, early builds, and Firelake, but little is known about how or why GSC shifted from futuristic sci-fi alien shooter to post-apocalyptic survival horror. It's a pretty extreme change. Somebody apart from Tejas responded, and this is what they said. This sounds plausible enough, so I'm going to include it. Not him, but at one point they gave up on the idea of having Oblivion Lost take place on various planets and switched over to Crimea, where an alien satellite directing evolution of life on Earth over millions of years, called the Black Monolith, would have crashed, causing the local wildlife to enter a state of hyper-evolution. The idea was further developed, and GSC decided to add an NPP in Crimea, exploding to the mix. Then Sergiy visited Chernobyl, which left an impression on him, and he decided to make the game take place there. Some team members opposed this as the disaster was still in recent memory, but they changed their minds when he took them to the exclusion zone. Now, where the tonal shift came from was never explained, but my guess is there was a lot of futuristic shooters on the market at the time, and they decided to make something novel. I, for one, am profoundly interested, so if any among you have anything to offer, by all means, please do so. Remember, this project, Oblivion Lost, began in 2001, and it was scheduled to come out in 2003. 4 years later, in 2007, we have something entirely different. Sergiy had this to say. At the beginning, we developed a game with a plot about the war of robots and aliens and the entourage of nature in the Aztec pyramids, but at every meeting we said to ourselves, we are doing complete nonsense. In 2002, the company released the combat HoverCraft arcade racing game Hover 8th, Combat Racing Zone, and another expansion to Cossacks called Cossacks Back to War. At the end of that year, a new RTS game named American Conquest was released. In March 2002, after GSC's company trip to the Chernobyl exclusion zone, the Oblivion Lost concept was wholly revised and used the Chernobyl disaster as a foundation, which leads to Oblivion Lost being named Stalker Oblivion Lost. But soon, there were copyright complications with the word Stalker, and then the game was scheduled to be released at the end of 2003. In 2003, a couple more games were released. The edition American Conquest Fight Back, and the FPS Firestarter. And of course, Stalker is, well, still in development hell for at least 4 more years, until THQ's Dean Sharp steps in to force the game to release. During this time period, it goes from Stalker Oblivion Lost to Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl. However, during these 4 years, GSC is still busy. In 2004, they opened GSC World Publishing, a division that publishes GSC's games in countries of the CIS and in Europe. Together with Ubisoft on 20th November 2004, it published its own developed RTS game Alexander, the official game based on Oliver Stone's movie. In 2005, a sequel to the Cossack strategy Cossacks 2 Napoleonic Wars was released. In 2006, the company released an expansion for the Cossacks series titled Cossacks 2 Battle for Europe, and a new RTS role-playing game, Heroes of Annihilated Empires. The company released a statement that Shadow of Chernobyl should be released in the first quarter of 2007. At the beginning of the year, some GSC employees left the company to found 4A Games. In March 2007, Shadow of Chernobyl releases. In 4 days later, it held the 8th position in the sales chart for various platforms, and the 1st position among PC games according to the rating of British organization ELSPA. In February 2008, 950,000 copies in the CIS and 700,000 elsewhere in the world were sold, which made Stalker the most successful project of GSC to date. The worldwide success pushed the company to develop its next project. In December 2007, a mobile game, STALKER Mobile, was created by Qplays in conjunction with them. Did you know there's a such thing as STALKER Mobile? STALKER Mobile is a game developed by Qplays that features Stalker in mobile phones, although the phone must be capable of supporting Java 2 applications.
In-game, it plays out much like the Stalker series. Fight enemies, trade items, get missions, and get gear. Most of the equipment and artifacts featured in the mobile version are the same ones featured in the game. Although, unlike the PC series, this does not have a real storyline, and it deviates from the series' feature of no-level systems, as now, one can upgrade their accuracy, health, strength, and anomalous/bullet resistance by leveling. In combat, enemies are marked with a downward triangle, which serves as their health counter and changes color as they continue to take damage. Health and armor are now depicted more as lives rather than protection or a bar. The health bar is located at the top left of the screen, while the ammunition bar is located at the bottom left. The player could also enter codes to enable cheats throughout missions. This is merely the official version. There was a port done with some success years back of the level Cordon all by itself. It was quite janky, but as a Stalker fan, you should be well versed in jank. After the player moves on and attempts to leave Cordon, the game ends or is unfinished. Actually, I believe this was known as Project Stalker, but I can't be 100%. A further glance into the topic has this to say from Regash. I believe it was abandoned in 2017. Apparently, they had some issues related to copyrights, and they wouldn't be able to distribute the game in a proper way. Also, versions which they have released only contain the storyline in Cordon, so you wouldn't be able to get past it even if you knew Russian. So, there you have it. 7 years ago, we lost the closest rendition we had. A Reddit post, some months ago, announces a remake of Stalker Mobile, porting it back to PC. The post goes, "Hey Stalkers, I've got great news for ya. The first version of my Stalker Mobile remake is here. If you don't understand what it is, look at this post. I hope I've fixed all critical bugs, cause long-term development can blind my eyes and I could miss something, but I hope everything is okay. The basic gameplay is close to the original Java game, but with a PC manner. Of course, the game is not ideal, but I like it. It's like a dream come true. There's a link, download, and controls in the description, as well as specifications. If you tire of every mod that's released nowadays, maybe thinking about giving this a go, and with the Steam Deck, Asus ROG, and others, maybe it's much closer to being mobile than we ever imagined. A fan plays through the original Java version and has this to say. I decided to play some Stalker Mobile since it has been in my mind for some time. I played it many years ago on a Java emulator, and since now I stalk this subreddit, I have decided to document and comment my gameplay. This way, I would relieve you of the pain of playing it yourselves. Let's start clicking. The main menu is simple as a bolt. No cool background here. As far as I know, another version has a background. Doesn't matter, let's explore the menu. Credit where it is due, this game was made by QPlays in 2008 if I'm not mistaken. The trailer on YouTube uses the beta version, which was downgraded when released. The controls are as follow. As you can see, it uses almost all keys on a traditional keyboard. We click on New Game and this text intro appears. For your information, there's no music after the menu theme, and barely any sound effects. Apparently, we are one of many soldiers patrolling the cordon of the exclusion zone. We ride a helicopter with our buddies and the captain. Suddenly, we crash. Ah, my eyes. The pixels, they stab my retinas. Har har. Bad graphics are bad. Enough. Everyone else is dead, except the player, and the captain who is missing. Our only weapon is the Fort 12, which has infinite ammo. There's a looting mechanic, just like Shadow of Chernobyl. Point your camera at objects, click, and choose which items you want to take, or leave. I see a medkit, I take it. The zone doesn't allow for mistakes. As you can see, there's a weight limit just like regular Stalker. And there's no remove weight limit mods here. On the menu, there's a character category which takes us to this screen, Classic RPG mechanic, you get XP on combat and doing side quests, and you can level up your character. That's something we've never seen before in a Stalker game. Isn't that fascinating? Accuracy improves your aiming skills, health gives you more hit points, and strength increases the weight limit. To the right, you can see the classic environmental protection from suits and artifacts. Walking ahead, I get ambushed by bandits. Notice there's only one character model that looks like best on a very low-res, low-polygon model. I kill them, and the map option appears on the right side of the screen. The map looks pretty similar to the map in Corden. The map looks pretty similar to the map in Shadow of Chernobyl. We crashed on the east side of the Corden, and there's a stalker camp to the north. We choose our destination, and we quick travel there. It's not Rookie Village, but it's a safe place anyway. There's several stalkers to talk to, a trader, and some 2D fire. He takes a screenshot and writes underneath, demo_record1. Just kidding. It's the 3D viewer of the emulator. You can see the entire village from this perspective. From left to right, Galash, Rusty, and Fence. The first two give you advice in a quest. The third is just a scared rookie. The trader is at the other side of the road. Interestingly enough, there are several dialogue choices with different results. Our character is looking for his captain, and the stalkers want some favors first. This is the trader's window, who, judging by the prices, must be a Sidorovich sales representative. I accept some easy side quest first, killing some bandits up the road. I'll be posting more gameplay as I play. That's all for today. Hope you found this interesting, or at least mildly entertaining. And there it ends. A glimpse into the past, before smartphones were big, this officially licensed game was not a huge hit, but it will forever remain with us in our hearts.
In August 2008, the standalone expansion Clear Sky was released, a prequel, and then in October 2009, Call of Pripyat. This is also the same year they began work on Stalker 2, the cancelled version, which was announced in August 2010. But during development, the company shrank from 200 employees to 50. It had previously been the largest video game developer in Eastern Europe, with financial service companies naming it Entrepreneur of the Year in February 2011. However, in December 2011, a statement comes out from Sergiy saying that the company has dissolved. Let's take a look at this Polygon article for more answers. Sergiy Grygorovych was the CEO of the largest game developer in Eastern Europe, GSC. He and his company were famous for two game series. The first were Cossacks, a set of RTS games known best for its scale, pitting upwards of 60,000 units against each other at one time. Popular throughout Eastern Europe, the series made Grygorovych a millionaire before he was 25. The second series, Stalker, its first game subtitled Shadow of Chernobyl, was nearly 8 years in development when it was released in 2007. An ambitious blend of FPS gameplay and role-playing, it featured elements of survival horror as well as an open world that reacted to the player based on their reputation. It received outstanding reviews, both for its gunplay and its narrative, and became a hit throughout Europe and North America. In February 2011, while Grygorovych and his team were busy working on the fourth game in the series called Stalker 2, Ernst & Young, a multinational financial services firm, named Grygorovych as Ukraine's Entrepreneur of the Year. He was the first member of Ukraine's booming IT industry to earn the honor. 10 months later, on December 9th, Grygorovych dissolved his company. He gave no explanation to the staff beyond personal reasons. While the game's media flailed for answers, Ukrainian news site Ukrenews posted the simple headline, "Kyiv company decided to self-destruct." Polygon went to Kyiv to map the fallout from the implosion of Ukraine's most famous game studio. From the largest AAA developers to the smallest indie team, these are the people of the late GSC Game World and the games they're making after Stalker. The survivors. Oleg Yavorsky started working at GSC in 2000.
Привет всем, меня зовут Олег Яворский, я являюсь...
Interestingly enough, he doesn't just do game development. He also had a hand in making Firelake, which went on to make a few of the game's soundtracks.
Chances are, if you've so much as played, looked at, or heard about STALKER, you may have heard of this music group as well. Interestingly enough, there is no English resource on them, only the Ukrainian STALKER wiki has an entry. And detailed it is, but after reading through the page, I expected there to be much more, but there really wasn't. At least a quarter to a third of it is band members leaving to personal reasons, complications, etc. Firelake started out in the late 90s and worked on a few various things, eventually releasing an album in 2005 called The Temptation Journey. After this, they began to record the soundtrack to STALKER Shadow of Chernobyl in 2006, of course, along with Muzi. The wiki says that Firelake managed to put together 3 compositions, those being Dirge for the Planet, Fighting Unknown, and Against the Ionized Odds, respectively. The band's soundtrack is considered one of the best in the history of video games. They've had a few big breaks, but mostly, this group remains a cult classic, much like the games they assisted with. Since the wiki was a little lackluster, I decided to take a closer look. After inspecting it a little more, I found some archived web pages at the bottom with the help of the Wayback Machine, and came onto this. There's 2 versions of the site, one English and one Russian, with different sections. Thankfully, there's a more complete version of the history on their website. It really does look like a time capsule. But anyway, the band first got together in spring 1997 when 3 first-year students of Kiev Taras Shevchenko University realized during the class that listening to heavy music and desire to actually play it was their common interest. One of them happened to have an associate bearer of his Centaurian growling skills, willing to vocalize his talent within a heavy band like ours. This is decided on the first line of the band. In 1997, we all tried our hands to put it better our strings for the first time. We were all keen on turning out something special and interesting, having all been exposed to massive influence of Swedish Wave, i.e. At the Gates, In Flames, Dark Tranquility. We chose to stay in the same line. It's worth mentioning that we were short of the instruments, 2 semi-acoustic guitars, or at least the way we called them. The same was with sound processors or distortion pedals, so we made use of unique capacity of the speakers, playing a major over peaks, which was a feeble resemblance of real distortion. Our team was another problem we were to face. 3 of us could play guitar, 1 was limited to vocals only. We had neither a bassist nor a drummer. One day, during this wonderful high-tech rehearsal, the guitarist's team was inflicted major damage. Andrei and Alexei, Rhythm, fell over with each other over some trifle, and Andrei made up his mind to quit guitars and give drums a try. He was hopeless for the first time, but he seemed to have liked the kit. From that moment, we went to play in the following roles: Roman, vocals; Oleg, lead guitar; Alexei, rhythm guitar; and Andrei, drums. We were playing every now and then, and our skills in music, strangely enough, were improving and expanding. In February 1998, Roman quit the band, and we were left without a vocalist. Early in spring of 1998, Firelake took their first performance on Kiev stage, a mini-gig of 5 rough songs played on 2 guitars and drums, in local metal bar Grave. Vocals were performed by renowned Kiev metal lover Alexei Bess. Then, we tried to keep on rehearsing in Grave, but due to a certain discord with Bess and soon closed down at the very Grave, we started to seek another studio and vocalist. Roman, the former Growlman, introduced us to Dmitry, an acquaintance of his, also known in the Kiev scene as Lenin. Lenin helped us out with bass guitarist Roman to complete the band formation. Vehement rehearsals went on, compositions got polished bit by bit, and the overall style shaped up into melodic death metal with a wicked mix of Swedish Slav tunes. In half a year, namely in November 1998, our second concert took place in Kiev, this time in Korolyov House of Culture, where we played together with Disclaimer, our university buddies. In winter of 1999, there came another discord, this time with Lenin, resulting in his quitting the band and bass guitar Roman taking up vocals. More rehearsals and another gig followed up. In March of 1999, at Volon's Hut event teamed up Impact, Disclaimer, Camera Obscura, Tedium, Firelake, and Unerase. That session we see as probably the first mature band's performance, with a full-fledged La Sainte Lutte program with keyboards and female vocals added. Though the first try is not always lucky, people say, that gig inspired us like never before. It was on the 23rd of April when we played together with Kiev-based Unerased and Blast from Kharkiv, within the framework of the 5th The Great Commandment session in Kiev Russ Hall. That very performance must have been the top successful for us at the moment. Was it by fluke or by God? We had a splendid sound, this awfully important thing for a musician, you know. Straight after the gig, an interview for Ukraina Moloda newspaper followed up, along with an hour of chat on Radio Rock's Ukraine Live. Then it turned upside down and problems started. The first trouble was loss of our own rehearsal studio and lack of systematic rehearsals. Hard to fancy anything worse for a band, as a result. We also faced disagreement and strife within the band itself. Whatever hard the tries not to lose the attained level were, that could barely be evaded. Despite the loss in class, we still went on rehearsing at studios we managed to find now and then. On 26 November 1999, the 9th The Great Commandment session featured Firelake, Reflection, Egoism, and Unerase. As it is widely known, no pains, no gains. That's why we gained only further aggravated internal problems and discord out of that performance. A question to repeatedly pop up later on arose, to be or not to be, for the band. During the following half a year, indifference and silence reigned. But thereafter, the old yen for drum and distortion rave prevailed and made us get our hands on instruments again. In spring of 2000, we had several productive rehearsals, but these proved too little to prepare us for the gig we had been offered to play at. This time, it went all through the summer of 2000. From September on, Firelake went to rehearse in Irpin together with local Utopia. In fact, this upsurge turned out rather brief, and closer to winter these trips were off, so this was through such ups and downs that we created our music. Much has changed for us now. First off, it's the vision and stance on what we do. Sober providence and ability to weigh up the situation objectively has ousted childish recklessness. What has been unchanged through this time is our firm belief of our potential. We see it as Firelake rebirth and reckon listeners will see it the same as we do. A full demo album is now in progress. And that's where this page ends. As we go over to releases, it simply says, at the moment, we are recording our debut album. We pin our hopes on you getting your hands on it this spring. The photo page was quite disappointing aside from more numbers and dates. Some photos had some bites on them, which made me foolishly hope that something was there, but alas, there was not. Band was much the same, but it did provide more names. Friends, this is just linking them, well, friends. I came into this expecting a dead wiki, or nothing at all, so to have this much is truly an unforeseen boon. And at the bottom, naturally, it says 2002. A 22-year-old website. Isn't that insane? And to wonder what other iterations of this website there came to be. But this is the only one we get to see right now. The sparse information thus far should be enough to convince you that these guys are mostly unheard of. Now, what do others on the internet say or think about Firelake? One of the top posts I see come up is, will Firelake band return to Stalker 2? With the reply being, it'd be cool to have another track, or have their old one return. Encyclopedia Metallum says they're still together, but last release was 2012. For all intents and purposes, it looks like Firelake is stagnant, especially for a decade plus. With all the turnover, it does make me wonder why. And if we take a further look, there are lots of these posts, so I'm not the only one who's curious about them. There's even memes. If you care to take a look, there are previous versions of their songs, and some sound totally different than the end product, with one in mind. The community obviously cares about and misses this band, much like Muzi himself.
More than 11 years later, the soft-spoken PR manager was there for the end. Grygorovych just gathered us up all in the presentation hall he remembers. He said, I have decided to stop Stalker 2 development. Goodbye. It was a very short speech. The staff was in total shock. People went to their desks and stared dumbly at their monitors. There was silence for almost 2 hours. The cruel irony is that the team had been looking forward to that Friday for weeks. It was supposed to be the first chance for the entire staff to learn about Stalker 2's storyline. Yavorsky had even helped plan a small party, with pizza and drinks, intended to boost morale. The game had been in development for 2 years by that time, and layoffs and attrition had shrunk the staff from a high of nearly 200 to a core of less than 50. We were all so passionate about Stalker 2, we were involved with it for 2 years. It was like a child that we were slowly raising, watching it grow up. Their last paychecks would arrive in February. After the Christmas break, they would all be officially unemployed. After Grygorovych left the building, Yavorsky went ahead with the presentation of Stalker 2 anyway. It was a bittersweet moment for the staff, who sat viewing a partial trailer that they knew would likely never see the light of day. We were all so passionate about it, he says. We were involved with it for 2 years, and the Stalker series well before that, since 2001. And then that quote repeats, okay? After the presentation, not far from the cold pile of untouched pizza, Yavorsky and the rest of the middle management stood before their staff to discuss the two paths that lay before them. They could each go in separate directions, or they could band together and try to find another way, a way without Grygorovych and without GSC. In the end, Yavorsky says, "We decided to stick together. GSC's remaining leaders worked as quickly as they could to contact publishers in Europe and North America, but because of the holidays no one would talk to them. With time working against them, they began to look for venture funding. It was their first experience trying to find capital, something in short supply in the former Soviet country. We went to local investors," Yavorsky says. "We went to Moscow to talk to people in Russia about potential funding, but ultimately we found problems because Grygorovych seemed to want to continue with the soccer license on his own. Unable to come to an agreement over the intellectual property rights, the former staff resigned themselves to starting over from scratch, to putting a new game world on their own." Before we move on with the article, there is at least one more person I want us to talk about. I just came across this post and I thought I'd want to share it with you. So let's dig into it. Lukash, the forgotten father of Stalker's monsters, ex-GSC revisits the visionary artist behind the zone's horrors. 18 years after the original Stalker game, the eerie zone and its grotesque inhabitants continue to captivate players. Among the creative minds who helped shape that unsettling world was concept artist Viktor Marchevsky. In this republished feature from ex-GSC, we delve into the legacy of the brilliant designer whose imagination helped define the world of Stalker, and whose career was tragically cut short. There are people among the concept artists whose imagination goes beyond human limitations. You look at their works and think, these guys are crazy, maybe they're on drugs or something. For example, Geoff Darrow's sketches for The Matrix are close to that of a drug addict's hallucinations. Just think of the mechanics and robotic technology drawn to the smallest detail. But it's not about substance misuse, it's about artists that have a really vast imagination, and it's deeply stunning. There is exactly that type of a creator in the development team of Stalker. But he was better known as Lukash. Pseudo-giant, bloodsucker, pseudo-dog, flesh, chimera, and other representatives of the zone's wildlife came out from his pen. We knew almost nothing about Viktor for a long time, and he remained a mystery man for the general public. I guess any self-respecting Stalker fan will be interested to know who was the author of all these unforgettable images that still excite the minds of gamers. While working on this article, I had a chance to chat with Lukash's younger brother Artyom Marchevsky and his colleagues in the game industry, Denis Volchenko, Yaroslav Singayevsky, and Dmitry Dyachenko. Great thanks to them. Before starting, I'd like to explain the origin of Viktor's nickname. The last name of his father was Lukashenko, and later he changed it to Marchevsky, but Viktor chose to use the previous last name as his nickname. Artyom says, "Vitya was a great brother. He was exactly as an older brother should be. Actually, the older brother takes part in raising a child just like parents. There was a big age difference between the brothers, 14 years. Therefore, Viktor was the authority for him. Obviously, the parents were influential too, but the older brother is a different case. Of course, as a teenager, I was interested in talking to people who were older than me, because the difference of 14 years doesn't feel like an older generation in a teenager's perception. Vitya was not just an example, he was a mentor. And his methods of raising were often much more effective than parental. For example, when Viktor found out his younger brother started smoking, Artyom was not afraid of what he could tell their parents. He was afraid that Viktor was going to kill him, but at the same time, he was always a defender. Next to him, you feel as safe as behind an impenetrable wall. Everyone at school knew that, so teenage disputes were rare. They were afraid. Vitya's relationships with parents were good too. He was proud of them. He could talk to mom about everything in the world, from art to everyday topics. He always consulted with father, considering him a wise and smart person. The easiest way to describe the relationship with parents: we lived in the same building, Vitya on the 9th floor in apartment 33, and me with parents on the 8th in apartment 32. Absolutely identical apartments, but with a mirror reflection of the layout. Vitya showed his talent as a child. No one ever taught him to draw, it was given to him. Just like that, this talent was given to him from above. Naturally, the parents noticed that and in every way encouraged him. Vitya's craving for art was shown not only in drawing. He was always interested in exploring philosophy, for example. Actually, Vitya was read in many different topics. You could talk to him on any topic for hours. After graduating from school, Vitya enlisted in the army. During his time in the army, he learned tattooing and made a tattoo on his left hand. After leaving the army, Vitya brought home a hand-drawn icon. Dennis says, "It's hard to talk about it, but Lukash really was a cool artist and friend. He wasn't a simple person. You should see and hear him to understand what kind of person he is. In 3 words: charismatic, cheerful, living." Denis met Vitya in 1995 at training courses to get into the Academy of Arts. After graduating from the university, Denis ended up at GSC in 2002 and recommended his friend as an artist for the studio. In fact, from this point, Lukash was part of the game dev industry. Vitya had worked at Deep Shadows, Action Forums, and with me on You Are Empty. It should be noted that Vitya made the first sketches for the game, which were an instrumental part in the successful launch of the project at the Russian Game Developers Conference. Also, he introduced me to Yaroslav Singievsky, who later joined the development of You Are Empty as a writer and game designer. Yaroslav says, Lukash didn't work together with the team. He made concept arts in the pre-production and the beginning of production. Yaroslav and Vitya knew each other. Their fathers often interacted at work. Actually, Viktor set me up with Denis at that time, and I ended up in the game industry. He remained in my memory as a valiant guy. He was so tough, tall, and strong. I would never say by his looks that he could draw so well. I mean, his looks had nothing to do with drawing, and he was really cool at drawing. It was hard to implement his images in the game. A lot was lost on the way. Artyom says, if we talk about my attitude to Vitya's art, then it's very simple. Working as an artist was always prestigious. My teenage years fell in the rap culture boom that is difficult to imagine without graffiti and tattoos. Now imagine your brother can do tattoos and draw really cool. And imagine your brother draws the characters for video games that all your age mates are playing. I was super proud of him. My friends were coming over to visit me and I bragged about Vitya's sketches for them. I still can't understand where Viktor got so much imagination to create these monsters for Stalker. His idea has never ended. By the way, you can see Lukash's face in Shadow of Chernobyl. It's a character named Lukash. He's the leader of the Freedom faction at the army warehouses. That was until the build 2571, but in the release game, Viktor's face was given for the character named Max. Viktor originally drew only pencil sketches on paper. Later he learned Photoshop, bought a graphical tablet, and started to draw high-grade illustrations in color. Viktor took an active part in the development of You Are Empty, including voice acting. Many monsters were voiced by him. Dmitry Dyachenko knew Viktor Marchevsky a long time. Their buildings were close, and their mutual friend was Mandelstam, i.e. Denis. Dmitry says, we got along great, and when visiting a club or something else, it was peaceful at heart. Because Lukash had such a menacing, almost bandit look that people avoided all of us. Actually, he was a nice guy from a good and strong family, a very creative person. His sketches blew my mind. Lukash was a genius artist with a lot of ideas, and only a small part of it came to life. Lukash had a great voice with a cool tone. At the first opportunity Dmitry asked him to take part in voicing the firefighter from You Are Empty, he immediately accepted. Because Lukash was on topic. He created and drew the game characters, he understood the task very well. It was necessary to voice with no words, no phrases, something generic and specific. As always, Lukash arrived at our office in his favorite car, a black Volga. I gave him the gas mask, he put it on and worked in dozens of takes without taking off his long black leather coat. He tried very hard and played his guts out, and here's what we made. In the early development of You Are Empty, Viktor helped Dmitry to voice the first track for the game's soundtrack. It was a test task for the composer. For some time I was looking for a suitable scream. I chose different samples but none would fit, until I got the idea to ask Lukash. Several takes and we got just what we needed, a crazy scream the microphone barely withstood. I joined the Digital Spray Studios with this track and then the promotional teaser was created based on this theme. Vitya's looks absolutely didn't match his activity. He looked like some kind of bandit. There are a lot of different funny stories caused by his looks. Artyom says, we once went on vacation by car to Bulgaria. Just before this trip, Vitya changed his looks. He shaved his head and began growing his beard. He really looked like some kind of Islamist. Of course, the photo in his passport was different, with hair on the head and no beard. Bulgarian customs didn't want to pass him. They didn't find similarities with the photo in the passport, so Vitya had to shave his beard in the bathroom of the border checkpoint, and they allowed him to pass. Dmitry says, There's a funny thing from life. One day, Lukash gave a lift to a guy in his Volga. He was engaged in private transportation. The dude initially didn't want to get in the car, but Lukash smiled with a heart. Come on, get in, everything is fine. Lukash was dressed in the same black leather coat. It was his main outfit in winter. And the pistol was between the front seats. It was a gas pistol, if I'm not mistaken, and some amount of money under it. They were riding for 10 minutes. The dude was visibly nervous. As they got there, the dude handed him the money. Lukash turned on the light in the car to find change. Noticing the pistol, the dude realized he was in trouble. Perhaps he connected all the dots that were him on the way. Black Volga, the bandit in the leather coat, the driver's voice, and the golden bracelet on his arm. So he quickly got out of the car and said, no need for this. Keep the change, thank you. I guess he was happy that Lukash decided to keep him alive. Vitya was a person with a strong sense of justice by his nature. He had never accepted a lie. Money was never an influential argument for him in anything. Vitya always was the life and soul of the party. He had a special sense of humor. His jokes were never sick. Even obviously hurtful things from his lips sounded absolutely not. He could beat any situation. Vitya always avoided conflicts. Even if he surpassed the aggressor in physical strength, he did everything to avoid a fight. Unfortunately, Vitya had a bad heart since childhood. Artyom says, by and large, I grew up when Vitya passed away. I was only 17 at the time of his death. He was very stubborn, and like any man, he didn't really like to take care of his health, always the health of loved ones, but not his own. July 31st, 2005, the day of his death, was scorching heat, about 35 degrees centigrade in the shade. Vitya felt bad all day. Me and my parents were outside the city. Mom talked on the phone with Vitya all the time. We wanted to come and take him to the dacha. Vitya said he had to finish the job. We agreed that we'll come in the morning. About 9 or 10 a.m., me and my father came for him, but it was too late. Medics said Vitya had a stroke and perhaps an infarction. His heart couldn't take the heat. Dmitry says, 6 months before Lukash's death, Mandelstrom gave him a digitizer, and I was lucky to see his works. He drew only with a pencil or pen before that. Great opportunities opened up for Lukash, and what I saw was something incredible. I sincerely expressed my admiration for Lukash. I can only imagine how he could draw right now. I heard that Lukash was offered to work in the USA, but he declined it. Who knows, maybe he had taken an offer and went. Perhaps all of this would not happen. I think he would have been saved. It's been 10 years since Viktor Marchevsky, aka Lukash, left our world, and it's really cool that he is still remembered. It's touching to hear kind words about You Are Empty, though the game is dedicated to Vitya, and it was released a long time ago. I think he would be happy too. The original concept arts for the first Stalker drawn on paper by Viktor, preserved for 23 years, still hangs on the walls of the GSC office. I'm glad that despite all the time and life's changes, they were preserved in safety. They are a great value for me and proof that it's possible to create a masterpiece with an ordinary pencil. And now back to the Polygon article. It seems that the USSR, even though it's dissolved, has left a lasting mark on Ukraine. Ukraine formally declared independence in December 1991. In May 2013, former THQ executive Jason Rubin wrote an editorial detailing what it's like making games in Ukraine. Some of the more extreme anecdotes from the story, especially those featuring Georgian mobsters and smuggling computer equipment through customs, rubbed just about everyone Polygon spoke with in Kyiv the wrong way. Now, this bit about smuggling computer equipment through customs, I remember reading another article. One of the GSC staff members, this is about GSC, did this. I don't remember who. I might have to look this up more, but this isn't out of nowhere. While we were told that nearly all the claims Rubin made are false, we witnessed firsthand how the overall tone of his article rang true. 4A is a tiny place wedged on the lower floor of a Soviet-era industrial building that has been roughly remodeled. In some rooms, conduit drops haphazardly from the low ceilings, bringing power and internet access to employees' desks. The team of 70 works in a cramped, eclectic space. The art department is sequestered in a brightly lit room filled with chandeliers. The remaining stock of the lighting imported that occupied the space previously. From there, desks are laid out, seemingly at random, clumped together in a narrow set of connected rooms, then get darker and darker as you move from the QA testers, through the level designers to the animators. The office hallway circles around back to the entrance, where the company has built a sound booth. Here, an acoustically dead fort built from blocks of shrink-wrapped building insulation. All of the Russian voice recordings are made for the original Last Light, as well as all of the English and Russian tracks for the Factions DLC. Making games in a former Soviet state is challenging, mainly because living in a former Soviet state is challenging. Entrepreneurship is a new concept, an option only available in the last 30 years. The concept of saving money is still foreign to many. Sergiy Grygorovych was born in Ukraine and currently lives in Kyiv. He works as the director of marketing in Naval. I'm 35 and was born in the Soviet Union, he says. The Soviet Union gave you security. All the education in the Soviet Union was directed at that security. So you weren't supposed to start your own company. You would just go to school, go to university, then the government would decide where you would work, and you just worked there. You couldn't go homeless in the Soviet Union. You couldn't go bankrupt in the Soviet Union. No matter what you did, the government would be there to take care of you. If you lost your job, they would take care of you. So that's why people aren't used to having savings. But it is changing. The new generation does this, but the elderly still rely heavily on the government. Before the collapse in the late 80s, you were a workforce. You were not a slave. That's how things worked. It was all decided for you. And it is hard for people to get rid of this mindset, because it's not just in our minds, it's also in our culture. From my own conversations with natives, this largely rings true, because I've been told about factory jobs, and they wouldn't have to worry about apartments because chances are the workplaces would give them apartments. Now, they wouldn't be, the best thing in the world, but when you don't have to worry about rent or finding a place of your own and basically having a job guaranteed for you, there's not much you do have to worry about. Although the job might not be the best thing in the world, it is still, something to do. It is, like I said, basically guaranteed. What about Serverium and Vostok? Yavorsky said that since most investors did not have enough money to fund the entire development process for a multi-platform game the size of Stalker 2, the team was forced to lower its ambition. It settled on a PC-based multiplayer shooter set in a post-apocalyptic world. Serverium would look much like Stalker, but play more like Call of Duty. To reach as wide an audience as possible, the game would also be free to play up front. After these modifications, potential investors began to come forward. It was important to have a partner who was safe enough, Yavorsky says. You had to be sure that in the worst case scenario, if the game didn't work out, that funding partner wouldn't come to knock your head off or something. In the early 90s after the collapse, we really had those gangs around, and it was a risky time, Yavorsky laughs, deeply at first, and then swallows hard. They could easily kill you. The memory of that chaos, a period that Ukrainians call the Wild 90s, was still fresh on the minds of his team members. They were cautious, thinking it better to disband than to take dirty money. We were very lucky, Yavorsky says. By March 2012, we went with guys from Vostok Ventures. We found they were actually looking for a team like ours, he says. It took us barely 2 weeks to reach the basic agreement. Vostok Games was founded that month, and soon moved into its current location, an old industrial park in Kyiv just a few minutes walk from the former headquarters of GSC. The building, dating from the Soviet era, has been remodeled and looks new, painted a cheerful pink. It stands out from the overgrown industrial lots that surround it. Inside the office, Vostok's walls are bare. The conference room is empty save for a few chairs. Yavorsky says that Polygon is among its first visitors, that until now the team hasn't had a reason to purchase a table for presentations. But around the floor, more than 40 artists and programmers, the last remaining employees of GSC, are sitting and working on Serverium. They're tapping away in modern computers with dual monitors, creating assets and designing levels. Currently in closed alpha, the game is being played by slightly more than 1,000 Eastern European players. By the end of 2013, Vostok plans to open the game more broadly to other Russian-speaking countries. Morale is high, and Stalker fans seem excited to see what the game has in store. By the end of our visit, Yavorsky was beaming, proud of all that he and the other former GSC leaders have accomplished. But his team is not the only band of survivors soldiering on after the collapse of GSC. In fact, it's only the most recent. And now for A. A half-hour cab ride in Kyiv costs about 40 Ukrainian hryvnia, or about $5, but 30 minutes is all it takes to travel from Vostok to the only other AAA developer headquartered in Ukraine. The offices of 4A Games are set behind an 8-foot concrete wall glazed with Cyrillic graffiti. An old man sits near a weathered gatehouse behind the entrance to the complex. And inside that wall, he is surrounded by industrial debris and rusted chunks of Soviet-era trucks. Stray cats stalk the lot. Amid the clutter, huddled inside a small gazebo perched atop cinder blocks, a few casually dressed smokers kill time after lunch. Beyond them, an unmarked door leads into offices, where the men and women of 4A built a grim but popular series of first-person shooters. This is the home of Metro, including 2033 and Last Light. Like at Vostok, nearly everyone at 4A is a refugee from GSC. The company was founded in 2006, after the first Stalker game was finished, but before publishing. The owner of the studio is a short, powerful man named Andrew Prokhorov. The son of Ukrainian artists, he graduated university with a PhD in aeronautical engineering. His boyhood dream was to one day design and sell a beautiful aircraft based on his parents' paintings, but when the Soviet Union began to collapse in the 80s, his plans changed. From 1991 to 95, during his graduate work, he was employed by one government research center after another, earning a salary of less than $100 a month. He became interested in playing games and began to teach himself computer graphics as a way to make money on the side. Soon after he discovered GSC was hiring, he said goodbye to aeronautics forever. When Prokhorov came to GSC in 1996, it was only a loosely affiliated group of 15 people in a two-room apartment. The 26-year-old PhD was interviewed by their leader, a then 16-year-old Grygorovych. It was like a crazy house, Prokhorov says, but the work was intoxicating and the pay was marginally better than what he was receiving from the government. Throughout the early 2000s, as GSC grew larger on the sales of Cossacks, Prokhorov and others began to resent how the company's earnings all seemed to go to Grygorovych. Their CEO had stated many times that Cossacks earned the company more than $100 million, but Prokhorov says the wages of average employees remained comically low. In 2005, 6 years into the development of the first Stalker, GSC employed 140 people. Prokhorov says that in the parking lot, there were only 4 cars, 3 belonging to Grygorovych, a BMW X5, a Porsche Cayenne, and a Ferrari F430 with plates that read Stalker. We decided to make a firm where the first priority will not be money, but people. We pride ourselves in having created a good team. The 4th car was a second-hand beater owned by one of GSC's programmers. 140 people worked for Grygorovych, with only 1 car among them. There is anger, disgust even in his voice as he tells the story. Eventually, after a falling out with Grygorovych over wages, Prokhorov and 2 lead programmers left the company to found 4A. After the first Stalker published in 2007, Prokhorov says that Grygorovych fired the entire art department. At GSC, nearly all of them came to work to 4A. We decided to make 4A a firm, where the first priority will not be money but people. And here we go. Because if you have a good team, sooner or later you'll earn the money. Most of our people own a car. On the day Polygon visited, there were perhaps a dozen cars in 4A's main lot, a black luxury BMW among them. The average level of game industry experience at 4A is 10 years. Prokhorov puffs out his chest as he talks about his team, proud of its expertise, its perseverance, and how far it's come since leaving GSC 7 years ago en masse. Last Light survived the bankruptcy of its publisher THQ and has gone on to sell more than the original Metro title. The only challenge left to Prokhorov is finding enough people to help his studio grow. He says his darkest moments came during those rare instances when employees leave, because there's no one in Kyiv with enough experience or the right skill set to replace them. I managed to dig up more on the forums. He's had this to say about an autobiography. Are you going to write your autobiography? No, I don't think it might be meaningful to anyone. Maybe interesting, yes, but for the sake of interest to write, well, it's not interesting, he laughs. In fact, any path traveled by any person is unique, and it is difficult to emphasize something useful for yourself. It is even almost impossible. But from it you can emphasize a lot of interesting things, just to expand the horizon, nothing more. And given the fact that you need to spend a long time on it, then for the next 10 years, I just will not find the opportunity to sit down and pee for 2 months. Many people have a desire, with the help of an autobiography, to assert themselves. I may have it in 50 or 60 years, but now I'm unlucky. Even many universities offer me to teach in different specialties, but people are taught by usually successful people who don't need resources only when self-affirmation is important, and I notice that I don't need it yet. Many other people who I've spoken to who are teaching or bankers, they don't need money at all. They live in real estate worth $5 million for the city. They do it solely for self-affirmation, as I've already said. But they are older, I think. With age it can have value, but now, no, none. It's interesting to note that in an interview with Yavorsky, he even admitted they were short hands, and this was way before, early in the development of Stalker 2, way back in, 2010, 2011. And he also admitted that X-ray is morally and physically obsolete. Apparently there's also a piece with the art director, Ilya Tomachev. Let's find out. How and when did you get into GSC Game World? What projects were we working on? Once in 2004, when I was graduating from my studies at the Kyiv Academy of Arts, one of the classmates told me that my theme of watercolor resembles a computer game Stalker. I said I had no idea about this game, and I was advised to join the developers in response. Coming home, I dialed the words, Stalker Game, in the search engine, and on the first link launched a video review. In the video, to alarming music and comments of the announcer in English, the location of Pripyat was shown. I watched the video and thought, it's something new and very serious, I want to work with them. From now on, I decided that I would get a job at GSC and will create graphics for STALKER. I prepared a portfolio, sent examples of the work to GSC, and received an invitation to an interview. The next day I was already working, but unfortunately, a little known about the project for which he came. For several months I had to work on the game, Heroes of the Destroyed Empires. He painted different characters from the world of fantasy, to which he was always indifferent, and periodically persuaded Sergiy to transfer him to STALKER. It was absolutely impossible to focus on drawing dwarves and elves, when photorealistic landscapes of the zone flashed on the monitors in the next room, from which it literally smelled damp and rain. By that time, the project Shadow of Chernobyl was almost finished. All the graphic content of the game was ready, and I had no opportunity to participate in the development, but soon began the design of the prequel Clear Sky. And Sergiy offered me to take the position of art director of this project, to which I happily agreed. Who and where did you work before joining GSC? Before I came there, I worked in advertising for several years, engaged in printing, web design, made branded styles, logos, packaging design, etc., painted a lot by hand, worked as an illustrator on the creation of a visual image at the Eurovision Song Contest 2005. It was interesting to do all this, of course. It's not as interesting as to make games. What is the work of the art director? The art director is a person who determines and directs the development of the graphic content of the game, so that in the final form, the project looks stylistically whole, harmoniously fits into the style of the previous parts, but at the same time acquires new visual features characteristic only of this project. In addition, my duties include design of locations, creation of terrain maps, outlines of objects, architecture, anomalies, etc., control of the creation of models and textures of the environment, characters, monsters, weapons, fiddling of locations by objects in the level editor, control of the creation of game and promotional videos, creation of user interface, and the creation of marketing materials. How does the employee's working day of GSC and yours in particular? Usually at the beginning of the day, we organize a meeting where we report to each other about the work done yesterday, and we determine the priorities for today. Then we go to the workplace and work. My day usually starts with coffee, checking the mail, and making my own work plan for the day. Having made such a plan, I accept something to quickly draw. I wear a chair with different sketches on paper and a pen in my teeth. I give instructions to modelers and texture designers. I'm talking to game designers. Sketch of an anomaly, for example, I control some texture, because without it the modeling of an important object will stall, and draw sketches again. If by the end of the day all or most of my points of the plan are grinding, I'm pleased. Tell us more about these great rollers from SOC and Clear Sky. Who created them? Why did they not have in Call of Pripyat? Was it related to saving time and money? Script and storyboards of rollers for Shadow of Chernobyl and Clear Sky were prepared by GSC. After that, the videos themselves were created by our order by the Australian animation studio Plastic Wax, specializing in the production of video for computer games. So yeah, if you didn't know, around this time, GSC outsourced to a few different studios, especially for cutscenes and other different things, but most notably, I think cutscenes. And if you pay close attention, some of these cutscenes, there might be some visual inconsistencies with the actual in-game lore. However, it's nothing really to pick apart, and for the most part, it's just fine. But this is actually where the actor for Strelok comes from, the first actor for Strelok, Vincent Stone, and so that's actually where that comes from. In Call of Pripyat, Tomachev continues, we were limited to a relatively small budget. In addition, we had claims to the quality of the videos that Plastic Wax made for Clear Sky. Therefore, we decided to do the video for Call of Pripyat on our own, stylizing it in the manner of documentary reporting, which do not require large resources for manufacturing, and at the same time would add novelty to the visual series of the project. So, you can always tell whenever GSC would do it themselves, because whenever they would do cutscenes, it would be in-game, okay? They would be using X-Ray Engine, and you would just see the camera move around. For example, like in Agroprom, you see the camera go around the institute, the complex, and then it comes back to the player. They do the same thing in Call of Pripyat a couple times, and that's about it. That's as much as their cutscenes go. How was GSC's travel to the zone? What allows you to visit the most important places in the zone where tourists aren't allowed? Aren't you scared? GSC has long been friends with Alexander Novikov, Deputy Technical Director of the CNPP for Safety. By the way, this is where Novikov comes from Clear Sky and Color Pripyat. He always helps us in organizing trips to the zone and regularly provides new photographic materials from the most inaccessible corners. Perhaps good relations with Novikov and the administration are our path to places close to tourists. The organization of a trip for photo references for Color Pripyat happened as follows. First, we decided on what locations will be in the project. Then, using Google Maps, I noted on the map the most visually attractive architectural objects, trying to avoid those that have already been filmed by us before, and then set a map with notes to Novikov. Alexander, who knows the zone as a real stalker, paved the route of our future journey along the points I have indicated, avoiding the places most polluted by radiation. The day before departure, we arranged a meeting at which we identified the tasks for the upcoming photo shoot for each person, taking into account the characteristics of the camera. For example, cameras with a wide viewing angle were more suitable for the premises, and with a smaller angle for shooting on the street. Cameras with a large resolution of the matrix for textures, with small for small objects. When we started working, each person knew what he needed to shoot. Everyone was busy working in their sectors and was not confused by each other under their feet. As a result of a continuous 5-hour photo shoot, we shot in detail the entire first micro-district of Pripyat and the Jupiter plant. 17 gigabytes of photos were brought to Kyiv. It's not scary to drive in the zone. Not much more than in Kyiv. Our stay in the zone in its harmfulness is comparable to watching TV for 10 hours. How often does GSC visit the area to collect material? Differently, for example, to create Shadow of Chernobyl took more than 3 trips. For Color Pripyat, 1. And for Clear Sky, we did not even arrange a single trip. It all depends on the concept of each project. If the script provides for a lot of scripted scenes and in part linear passage, then for such tasks, it is more suitable for thoughtful design from scratch. Then there are locations like the Red Forest or Limanska. If you need a classic stalker frame of action, it is better to meticulously reproduce some piece of the zone. Have you been to the zone? Your impressions? I was in the zone once. I've already described this trip. It was crazy running with the camera in Pripyat. I didn't even have time to get the impression of the zone. It was no time. I remember the unusually clean air, silence, and an open bottle of Soviet kefir in one of the dorm rooms. In the game, we can go into the building of this hostel and arrange an ambush against mercs. Why was the prototype of the city of Limansk from Shadow of Chernobyl taken from the old district in Kyiv? Where is the area? Can I visit it now? It was supposed to be demolished. At the very beginning of the development of Clear Sky, my bad, this is actually Clear Sky, not Shadow of Chernobyl, my bad. Before me was faced with the task to develop the design of a certain urban location provided in the plot. It was only known that at this stage of the game, the plot acquires a linear development. I needed to find an image of the city that would fit harmoniously into the zone, and at the same time be different from Pripyat. Limansk was supposed to be an alternative to Pripyat. Therefore, I chose as a prototype of Limansk the old district of Kyiv near the metro station Cherniv. This place gave me the location different from the large-scale and gloomy mood. It turned out to be a small chambered town, abandoned, but preserved to cozy. However, the cozy Limansk looks only on screenshots. The insane gameplay almost completely deprived this location of the charm. The area from which Limansk is copied has already been demolished. A month ago, I found photos of the ruins of these houses on the internet, but I did not copy them, and now I can't find them. Where does the creation of the game Stalker begin? How is the development going? At a large round table, a group of developers is going and once again tries to collect this puzzle. How to please fans, implementing new ideas, meeting technical limits, having time, and releasing everything without bugs. The development of the game is the process of solving such a puzzle. Tell us more about the schedule in the Stalker games. You know what is meant here by the word graphy. I would say with pleasure. In general, I like the graphics in one location card from Shadow of Chernobyl. It was called Dead City. There were such chic destroyed panel houses. That's really graphics. Why did textures fade in Call of Pripyat so much compared to Clear Sky? Well, avid gamers of the series know the answer to this one. In Call of Pripyat, we have increased the area of locations, which we have been waiting for a long time. This led to an increase in the number of objects at the level. The volume of textures used in one location has exceeded the permissible limits several times. At one stage of development, the levels spoiled so much that we could not compile them. To cope with this problem and convey to players such locations as Zayton and Jupiter, and not cut off half of them from half of the geometry, we have introduced a special restriction in the game on the possibility of optional choice of texture quality. If the volume of video memory is not enough for the stable operation of the game, with the maximum resolution of textures, the game automatically sets the slider of the texture on the middle quality scale. In the games of the series Stalker, there are many characters with real faces. How is the transfer of a person's face into the game? Who in reality are these characters? Sidorovich, Sakharov, Bartender, Doctor, Scar, Lebedev, Cold, Beer, Degutierov, Zulu, who draws Strelic. He's something remotely like Sergiy Grygorovych. To reproduce the face of a person in the game, we need 7 photos from 7 different angles. And if you thought it was intricate then, imagine how much more it is now. It is necessary to remove with the most uniform lighting, with a minimum of shadows, and with the maximum possible increase, so as to reduce future distortions. For such shooting, we use telephoto lenses with multiple magnifications, and shoot from a long distance. From the photos, we build a low polyboard model of the face, with a special mesh topology for working in the 3D sculpting program, and make a detailed facial model based on this grid. With the obtained geometry, we remove the norm map, and again build a low polygonal grid, but with a completely different topology, suitable for a game engine. After that, we project those very photos on the resulting model, draw the seams at the joints of the projections, and get a photorealistic texture. Cold, a bartender from Clear Sky, and Vano from Call of Pripyat were created by the appearance of the same person, our animator Eugene. Cold was reproduced almost one-to-one with its original, and the image of the good-natured Vano had to... well, the original features were changed. Sidorovich, Sakharov, Barman, Doctor, and Strelic, fictional characters, they don't have a prototype in reality. The prototype of Scar was, of course, the main character of Stalker, Alexander Kadanovsky. Lebedev was made from the guard of the GSC office, that's funny. Cold barred the appearance of our animator Eugene. Beard is an active participant in the strikeball game Stalker Father Valerian. Zulus is made from a fan and also a strikeball player nicknamed Tor. Degutierov was copied from the appearance of my comrade Alexander Poshtaruk. Cardin and Degutierov. In real life, the prototype of Cardin, Konstantin Stepitsev, is a very cheerful and completely non-drinking person, the author of the design of the user interface of Call of Pripyat, which you saw on the box of the game, the design of the site of Stalker, and even bunches of beautiful things. Where did the images of monsters come from? Is it true that Snork is the brainchild of fans of the game? Most of the images of monsters were created by Lukash. Snorks indeed were created by a fan of the game, or precisely a fan named Light. Her name, unfortunately, I could not find out, but I found her first image of a Snork. It's in front of you. Where did the ideas of creating animated images and the mechanism of work of anomalies, except Roadside Picnic? A little from the film Stalker and from the imagination of the developers. What is hidden under the groups of duty and freedom? How did the idea to make the debate arise? Some fans see in the open enmity between duty and freedom in the zone the ideological confrontation between the countries of the former USSR and NATO. Is it so? In the confrontation between duty and freedom, we did not put any political hints. Groupings were created unlike each other for expressiveness, for contrast. Why in multiplayer are we only given the opportunity to play for freedom or mercs? Only because their costumes differ from each other in color, which makes them easily recognized. In fact, you are not playing for either of them but for blue or green. How does Ilya Tomachev like to rest after a busy workday? I know that you love salsa. Why dance? I love to go to a nightclub after work, get shots and dance with girls. I love salsa because it's some kind of completely different world, unlike anything I'm dealing with at work. That doesn't mean I'm tired of Stalker. I love this project. But having worked a week in the empty, damp atmosphere of the zone, literally feeling a wet rain cloak, you experience great pleasure from throwing off this cloak, hugging a girl and dancing with her. And then he recommends a YouTube link. What's wrong with your head? I have a cucumber in my head, the same as those sold in a vegetable store. It's only much more in size. It may even be edible, but I don't know for sure. I don't pay any attention to it. I have classes and more important things. In conclusion, he specifically for them provided illustrations, Lemansk, Clear Sky. Now, scrolling down this list here, there are so many interviews with book authors, and we're not going to focus on that. Sergiy keeps managing to steal the show, and we keep learning little tidbits about him. He's played guitar for a long time, since childhood. Now, one of the more recent interviews with Sergiy, he actually switched to Russian. This was about a year or two ago with a Ukrainian correspondent, a journalist, and that was actually like the only notable thing that they said was that he wanted to switch to, I guess, with, the political climate and everything, but it's nothing really new to him. I don't know why he carries such a regard for it. Maybe it's just because it's more useful, but even whenever the Stalker games came out back in, 15 years ago, Russian was the first language they were in because of the audience. They were trying to cast a wide net, and then later on, obviously we got Ukrainian, English, everything else. Well, I mean, it does make sense because GSC, that was their initial work, right? Translating games into Russian, so that's probably what they're most comfortable with, at least at that time. And this was before 2014, 2022, He even talked about Sergiy a little bit and said that, well, people were able to understand that just fine. And it isn't really about how a character is speaking, more about their emotions, which is very interesting. There's actually an interview with Prof. This is interesting. And here we've got a little bit of a section. It reminds me of an old dating website. It tells you his loves, his dislikes, his motto. Okay, this shit right here, that is straight out of like 2005, man. Welcome, Andrew. Please introduce yourself. 36, creative director of 4A. Slavic character, emotional, friendly, hot-tempered. Who did you want to be as a child? I grew up in a family of professional artists, drawing from diapers, and another path except for the artistic did not represent. By the end of the school, however, I decided to become an aircraft designer. Yeah, we know that. Let's see. He talks more about schooling, of course. Respectful to Soviet education, a well-established mechanism. Let's see. Continued studies further after the institute, postgraduate and dissertation on the topic, dagging of flow parts of aviation, based on the analysis of the non-stationary structure gas flow. But he won't go into details. Worked as a coach bodybuilding. He started with Warcraft 2000, doing additional art content. Really didn't know the words. With Dmitry Zeny, one of the fathers of Cossacks, created a screensaver. More interesting was the unseen project Doomcraft. Monsters from Doom on the battlefields of RTS, it was a cool idea. Being the main only artist on the Venom project, there were only 2 programmers. How did you make the FPS with such a small team? It was a case. Sergiy Grygorovych and Roman Ludd, future creator Xenos, the same 2 programmers, it's a very good tandem. Justice for the sake. Note that Sergiy Grygorovych and Roman still participated in the creation of the art Nezin. How did it happen? Probably just that no one told us you can't work. There were no internal barriers. In many ways, it was easier than in Stalker. You make levels and animations, weapon and characters, videos, etc. No meetings, statements, pre-deployments for someone's poorly done work. He talked and drove with them. All art was done in the prompt memory of his own head. Keep in mind, this is Google Translate. I'm going back and forth between Yandex and this. And then there was Stalker. How hard was it to run such a project? How much is in this word for my heart? Meat. This diet is blood, tears, and sweat. It is 7 kilograms of lost weight and 50,000 lost hair. 50 trillion unrestorable nerve cells. This is a stage. The point of bifurcation, springboard. Apotheosis of creativity that escaped to freedom. Delight of creation and bitterness of defeat. That's 6 years of life. It's a game dreams. In such a pathetic spirit, I can continue for a long time. I came to Oblivion Lost in the end of 2001. By this time, the creation of Ilya Tomachev and Alexander Maximchuk, the X-ray engine shone like a diamond. Unambiguously, it was the best picture in the world at the time. Came as the main artist. Made all that by the end of March 2002. Oblivion Lost became a Notes of the World Stalker, the game about the zone. Since April 2002, he became the head of the project. The main principle is here's one of the more very important questions for people interested about him. Why did you leave GSC? One day I felt the strength that I could do something of my own. Staying achieved is like going back. Such like me, there were 3 more, all from the Stalker team. How hard was it to open a new studio? What is 4A? And what will it become in the future? Of course, there is no money, and local investors are not yet ready for investment in game development, looking for a long time, but whoever seeks always will find. And our philosophy is as follows: to create an association of professionals. The main value is people. Co-founders are themselves in the past. Developers are better aware than others. We want to be successful, a company capable of creating projects at the highest level. He talks a little bit about Metro 2033, the visual style of which computer games is closest. Half-Life 2, Silent Hill, Gears of War. Are there any hobbies not related to gaming and 3D modeling? Few hobbies now. Previously, bodybuilding for 15 years, martial arts, hikes. And now somehow more work and more family. I love the bike, I go to the studio. I want to travel, but it's not cheap. But we work in this direction. If not an artist in gaming, how could fate be? Most likely aviation science or working in an aviation design bureau. I don't like Mondays. What can you tell everyone who you worked with Stalker for almost 6 years? Many are still working in GSC. Many already in completely different studios. It won't work out. You can talk and talk. All the people with whom I had a chance to work, I want to participate in the creation of the game Dreams, to help them realize their own dreams in the future. And then there's a bunch of footnotes thanking everybody from the teams and all that. Mostly just take this with a good grain of salt because it is translated and it's not the same as in the intended language. So, but that's going to happen with translation software. Wow, this is crazy. Another interview, a Q&A, if you will. But Sergiy said that their main competitor they see is Valve. I wonder, in what foreign company for the development of games do you consider your main competitor? Probably in the West, our main competitor is Valve, since in terms of activity closest to us, which is also important, their products are always distinguished by quality and atmosphere. In my ambition and goals, I've always focused on Blizzard projects. They remain a benchmark for me in many ways. I still actively play Warcraft 3, Frozen Throne. I participate in the championships on Dota, StarCraft 2. As far as I know, Metro 23 is a linear corridor shooter. It's a completely different game. There's no competition there. Of course, it's difficult for me to forget that a year before the release of the first Stalker, these people stole my technology and graphics. We realized this when we approached the Research Center for Forensic Examination and conducted an assessment of our engine and what they distributed at exhibitions. There were even our textures, but external similarities does not make them our competitors. They went in a different direction. Where do I need to start to open a game development studio? I live in St. Petersburg. Knowledge in programming is a current of the game. Has not ever made a suitable single buddy. I want to learn all the silly programming in the summer. I just dream of doing games for a very long time, but I don't know why to start. Okay, damn, this translation fucking sucks. They had dreams to put Stalker on console, but this died when Stalker 2 died in 2011. This is funny. They're a little bit they're scared like Terminator. How do you see computer characters in the AI game? What do you plan to add or cut? I think humanity will spend more than 1 decade to bring AI. We do not specifically improve the simulation of life in AI because we are afraid that it will get out of control and start a war with us. Even all the way back then, they had plans to add female characters. They just never did it because, well, they asked if they would be in the new Stalker. Does GSC study the opinions of ordinary gamers, game forums, letters to the company? We collect feedback, impressions, and suggestions of players from forums, discuss them, draw conclusions, consider the possibility of introducing certain offers. The answer is yes. We listen to the opinions of players much more than to our own. They even acknowledge how the quality of the books went down. For the quality of books, as you might have noticed, the publisher of AST began a series with the already known author Vavitsky, attracted one of the grandees of the national fiction of Zork, whose books became prototypes of computer games. That is to say, the quality of books is worse, at least incomprehensible. We can say that some authors will move from XMO to AST. So the other day a contract was signed for the continuation of the Book of Alexei Bobol in the process of signing. Grigorovych says that the Cossacks came from something native, Ukrainian. After all this, the game is also about our country and the first in the world. Now, having grown up, he thinks in other categories, but then at the age of 19, he wanted to create patriotic strategy. It is for this reason that we publish it in Ukrainian, even demanded that it would not be sold in Ukraine, the Russian version. Apparently, he never went to college, which I suppose makes sense. I know you don't have a higher education. You think that for a businessman who is engaged in development of games and publication, education doesn't matter. Unfortunately, we're not taught this. When I need it, I read literature and management, marketing, self-education. Everyone, I think, should study until they find themselves. He doesn't like smoking or drinking. He plays sports. Every Saturday we go to play basketball, go to the gym, swimming pool, participate in tennis. I think we've gotten a pretty good idea here. Obviously, Stalker is a pretty big part of this, the company. However, they don't neglect their other projects. We've now reached the end of interviews on this website, the forums, but of which there were over 100. However, I'm going to say at least half of these are mod makers and authors of books. So there wasn't that much to go off of. In the end of 2014, GSC reopened and announced it was working on a new game. Evgeny became its new CEO. In May 2015, the company announced Cossacks 3, a remake of the first one, including all the original gameplay. The game was released on 20th September 2016, and then in 2018, GSC re-announced Stalker 2, which released 6 years later. Scrolling through this Wikipedia, I don't see anything about the fire that they had. They did have a small fire, I do believe, if I remember correctly, but they don't have any mention of it here. They also, since the invasion, have mostly moved to Prague, and that is where they are doing their work for now.